Stephen Guilbeault was bad, but Mark Miller is worse. Our new Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture believes the Bible is hateful and wants to strip it of his hate speech protection. The scariest part is that the man that Mark Carney put in charge of retabling Bill C-63, the worst censorship bill in Canadian history. And if that doesn't worry you, wait until you hear what Queen University law professor Bruce Pardy has to say about it tonight. My name is Nico Lagan, and I'm too conservative for the conservatives. My co-host Rob Ambrose, not woke enough for the liberals. We are the political orphans. Without further ado, tonight on the show, I'm very happy about this. I'm quite excited. We are joined by none other than Queen University law professor and executive director of Rights Probe, Bruce Pardy. Mr. Bruce Pardy, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Thank you. Good to see you guys.
How's it going, Bruce? Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
Like I was telling you prior to recording, I've been trying to get you on since I saw you on Jordan Peterson explaining Bill C-63. And I was also telling you how surprised I was that a unwoke law professor still has a job at Queen University. So good for you.
Yeah,
Congratulations on both.
Nico's been fangirling for a little while here, so glad to have you on. Finally. Now maybe he'll shut up.
Nope. No, I create content for a living.
Right. Nope.
I will never shut up.
Nope.
I will never shut up. No. So before we get into it, I wanted us to start kind of a common ground place just to make sure we have our definition in order, because we do record content with a lot of lawyers, a lot of constitutional lawyers. So don't be fooled by our appearance. We are a bit smarter than we look. Yeah, we're a tiny bit smarter than we look.
Yeah.
But I figured we would start at a legal perspective of explaining free speech, but more in a way as is free speech absolute?
Right. Good question. Good place to start. Start at the beginning.
Right? And also, should it be? I guess two parts to that.
Right.
Yep.
So we have a right, a guaranteed freedom in the Charter. Freedom of expression. That's what it says. And the first thing you can tell from reading the words in the Charter is that you don't have the right to free speech, at least not in the way that it says, right? Because it's stated in absolute terms. It says everybody has the following freedoms. Freedom of expression. Okay. But everybody can think of a situation in which your speech is illegal. So here's my favorite example. You walk up to somebody on the street, real close, and you say, I have a knife in my pocket. You give me your wallet, or I'll stab you through the heart. Okay? That's an assault. It's a criminal offense. But it's just speech. So if you have a guaranteed freedom in the Charter that says freedom of expression, and all you've done is talk, well, how can it be an offense? Because the freedom is not absolute. And you can also tell this, because the thing is stated so basically and without definition, without precision, without elaboration, where the line is between what is protected speech and what is not, you can't find that out from the document. It doesn't say. So where do you find out? Well, it's in the hands of the courts, right? So the Charter is not determining what your rights are, the courts are, because those rights have internal limits. And plus, we have Section 1, which says that these rights and freedoms are subject to reasonable limits. And then the government and the courts have the power to decide when a limit is reasonable and your right can be set aside. All right, so number one, it's not absolute. It can't be. But number two, it's in the control of somebody else. You cannot demand the right to speak based upon the words of the Charter, because that's not the way the Charter works.
So basically what you're saying is that speech in our charter is definitely not absolute. But not only is it not absolute, but you are at the mercy of a potential woke judge to say what you can and cannot, to decide what you can and cannot say.
Right. Well, let's not even go so far as the woke judge just yet, because we have a jurisprudence in this country about free speech that has established places where the government can go in spite of the guarantee, and those places. This is long in the works. This is not just recently. This has been going on for a long time, and the Supreme Court of Canada has said, for example, that it is a reasonable limit for the legislature to prohibit the thing that we now call hate speech. That wasn't done necessarily by just a bunch of woke Supreme Court judges. These decisions were made by the judges on the court at the time, including some relatively conservative judges, those members of the court that you would have described as more conservative than the others. Right? So this is not a partisan thing. Even we have adopted an approach to the question of free speech in what I think is a completely erroneous way. But because of that approach, we are stuck with the wrong end of the stick, and it leaves us asking the wrong questions about what the limits are supposed to be.
Should hate speech laws exist? Because that's the next question that makes sense. If our free speech is not absolute, which clearly it isn't,
right? Should
hate speech exist, or the laws against hate speech exist?
In my opinion, the answer is no.
Okay.
And in fact, in the U.S., who they also have, of course, a right to free speech in their Bill of Rights. The thing that we call hate speech in Canada is constitutionally protected speech in the U.S. So the kinds of things that we prohibit in Canada would not be permitted in the United States. Now, that's not because the wording of their section is superior. They're both very basically stated. It's just that our courts have done a different thing with our words than their courts have come to with their words.
So at least it seems that
Bruce,
we agree that free. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, Bruce, just sort of as a layman's explanation there, you used the term jurisprudence. I'm somewhat familiar with the term, but I think it would be helpful to get more of an in-depth definition. Now, as I understand it, is it things that are not necessarily stated in law or in the Constitution, but which the judges, through a number of decisions, have just sort of made it the law of the land almost by fiat?
Yes. Well, see, this is the job that they've been assigned. So you can't blame the courts entirely, because the enactment of the charter, along with the rest of the new Constitution in 1982, basically gave the courts this role. They say, look, here's a roster of rights, and we're not going to describe them very well or in a very detailed way. We're just going to state them. And then you guys, courts, you're going to go off and you're going to apply these rights. But by the way, you're going to have to interpret them and tell us what they mean. Right? This is a job that the document gives to the courts. So, and there are lots and lots of instances where I've criticized the way, especially the Supreme Court, has gone about interpreting these various rights. I think they've made lots of mistakes. However, to be fair, it is a job that they were given by the people who put together this 1982 Constitution at the time. So you can't blame them for the role that they now have.
Mm-hmm. So we seem to agree that that free speech is not absolute, although I personally believe it should be. Hate speech laws should not exist, which would make speech absolute. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you agree with me that that free speech should be an absolute thing.
Well, hold on. So I agree with you about the hate speech, for sure.
Okay.
I don't think that should be a thing. Well, what do you say about my example about going onto the street and threatening somebody physical harm in exchange
I
for
don't
their
like
wall?
your example because I never thought about that one before, so I don't like it. I don't like your example. But you're right, because it becomes a physical. It is a menace in French. I don't know why I'm not thinking English right now, but you are.
It's a threat. Exactly. It's a threat.
physical threat.
I think that the threat of physical violence, in my opinion, I'm okay with limiting that kind of speech. I think it becomes much more problematic when, you know, there's no physical violence. It's just hurt feelings that we're talking about. But
no question. The example, I agree. Yes,
it highlights the complexity of the issue for sure.
But it also helps, I think, to illustrate how we have the wrong end of the stick on the free speech and the hate speech thing. Here's how it goes. Right now, we are engaged in conversations, and this is the kind of conversation that the politicians are having, arguments about, what is reasonable for the government to restrict? Like, where is the reasonable line beyond which the government cannot go? What kind of speech is unreasonable speech that you should be prohibited? Okay. For my money, that is entirely the wrong question. Entirely the wrong question. If you ask that question, you're going to get bad answers that lead us to where we are right now. Right? Arguing about whether or not there ought to be a religious exemption for hate speech laws. Okay. It's a crazy place to end up. The way it ought to be done in my books is this: to say, look, you're allowed to say anything except speech that violates somebody else's rights. Now, why is a threat not allowed? Well, because people have the right to be free from violence. So if you come up to them and make a threat of imminent violence, well, you're now violating their right. And it makes sense, therefore, that you should not be able to say that. And there are other examples as well. And this is about identifying what rights we all have that make up our own freedoms. So let's go with this. Let's assume for a minute that we lived in a free country.
Well, that's a stretch there. That's a stretch.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. But if you were a free person, then what does that mean? I mean, what rights would you have as a free person? And I would define being free as the absence of force or threats of force from other people. You are not subject. If you are free, you are not subject to the force or threats of force of other people. Right? Yeah, that means that if you are to be free, then the law must prohibit other people from imposing force or threats of force upon you. That's all. Right? And that means it's a reasonable case to make that assault, like the threat of force, should be illegal, that harassment might be illegal in the sense that people are always in your face and won't let you out, won't leave you alone, contrary to your consent. There are certain lines now that we can imagine that maybe are too far if the proposition is you are a free person with rights. Okay, and that gives us a principled way to define what the limits of free speech are. Okay? But we don't do that. We're not there. Where we are instead is into this, realm of public conversation about what reasonable speech consists of and what the reasonable limits are in the public good. Okay, that's a crazy way to ask the question. Let me give you an example. When Parliament was debating Bill C-16, that's the bill with the amendments to the Canadian Human Rights Act that threatened the pronouns that Jordan Peterson was involved in. Jordan and I and others were giving evidence at the Senate committee that was talking about the bill. And during this session, one of the senators said to me, he said, I'm a big free speech guy, but it just seems to me that requiring people to use somebody's preferred pronouns is just reasonable speech. And And you know, that's the error. The error is that you think the question is about what reasonable speech is. So I put it to him this way. I said, imagine a bill that said the following thing. Imagine that Parliament is going to pass a law that says Canadians, when they meet each other on the sidewalk, must say hello and good morning and thank you. Okay, that's reasonable speech.
Sure.
But it is a tyrannical law because now the government is deciding your speech for you. So it's got nothing to do with whether or not it's reasonable speech in the public interest. That's the wrong test. The right test, for my money, is what rights do those other people have? Whatever you say can't breach those rights. Otherwise, say whatever you want.
So we have to agree that there's a difference between physical threat and the threat of someone being offended.
Of course.
Okay, so
yes.
So we just need to make sure we're on the same page here.
Yes.
And
well, let me put it to you this way. Would you and I agree? Would you and I agree that people do not have the right not to be offended? That's not one of the rights.
Hold on, they don't. That's a lot of negative. I need to make sure that they turn into a positive in my head.
Okay,
so
all right.
They do not have the right not to be offended.
No one,
so basically,
no one has.
They have the right to be.
They do.
They have the right to be offended.
They have. Well, they have the right to be offended, but they do not. Yeah. They do not have a right to be free from offense.
To live free from offense. Yeah,
that's correct.
100%.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And if we acknowledge that, then any laws that have as their purpose to prevent offense should be, ideally, unconstitutional. Because now you're not interfering with anybody's rights.
Yeah, I was wondering what you'd think, Bruce, as a constitutional lawyer, about the wording. And Nico, you can probably give me an assist here. The bill, I don't know the number of the bill, but it's the one where it defines hate as, remember we
Bill C-9
talked about here on the show.
Bill C-9,
where and the words they use is what was it? Anything that's more than
yes.
Oh shit.
Disdain. It wasn't it disdain?
Disdain. That's what it was.
It is disdain.
Worse than disdain is hate. And how does that stand up in any court of law?
Well, so yeah. I'll read it to you.
How do you define where disdain ends and hate begins? Right.
Here's how it goes. This is the proposed definition in Bill C-9. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation.
Right away, we're starting off bad.
Or vilification, and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. Okay, so
everything is subjective. Everything is subjective,
and you are in the hands of the court.
Yeah,
right. I mean, who knows where the line between those things are? So let's just consider this. On the one hand, the emotion that involves detestation is now prohibited, but the emotion that is mere dislike is not prohibited. But what does detestation mean? If you look it up, you'll find all kinds of words, but one of the ways detestation is described is that it is intense dislike. So here's a situation. Intense dislike is criminal, but mere dislike is not. Okay, so where is the line between intense dislike and mere dislike? I mean, nobody knows that. So you're trying to thread a needle here.
I before we continue with Bill C-9, there was just one comment that I wanted to make to get your take on it, but you were talking about freedom is often, and I'm paraphrasing here, freedom is the right not to be, let's say, assaulted. Like I have the right not to be physically armed.
Right.
But wouldn't you agree that part of freedom is also, or should be, having the right to defend oneself? because I cannot control what others do to me. But I have spent 20 years in martial arts. I love guns. I love baseball bats. I love knives, and I know how to use them. I don't need the police to help me. I know how to help myself, and that is part of being free. As Jefferson, I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said that those who will exchange liberty for security,
for safety,
deserve neither. Right. So is that not what freedom is all about? To have the freedom. I can't control what you do to me, but I can control what I do to you based on what you do to me.
Yes. Well, no, we're on the same page. I agree. If somebody uses force against you, then in my books, you are entitled to use force in response. Sure. No question. But ideally, so one reason to have a state at all is to have the state keep the peace. Right? You don't want people attacking you in the street regularly. And you are able to defend yourself, but you don't want to have to do it all the time. Right?
It depends. I have new techniques to try. No, I'm just kidding.
But you want a peaceful society in the sense that you don't have people attacking each other everywhere, or stealing your stuff, stealing your car, invading your house. I mean, you want a society in which people are actually free, meaning they are free from the imposition of force from other people. And that's what the police are for, or supposed to be, I mean, in my books. But we have wandered away from that, if we ever were there, to this place now where we're debating in Parliament, what kinds of things you should be allowed to say that have nothing to do with violating other people's rights.
So now that I think we have a good definition of free speech, we agree on the free speech part, we agree on hate speech, we agree on what freedom should be about. Rob kind of alluded to the silliness of Bill C-9 as to what's more than disdain, what's more than dislike, which is absolutely ludicrous. We are not able to define those into human emotion, especially I don't want to be at the mercy of a judge to tell me I was more than disdained when I said something. But from a law perspective, what are the biggest issues that you have with Bill C-9? When you read that piece of crap toilet paper that was presented, that is literally 10 pages long, so not very long to read, right. Was there something as you were reading that you're just like, what the fuck am I reading? Maybe you didn't use those words, you didn't use French, but did you have that kind of that moment when you were reading it?
Well, there are several things. The first one was the definition that we've talked about, right? So the first problem is that there's already a problem in the criminal code, right? This bill C-9, makes things worse, but there is already a problem in the criminal code, and that is the existing provision that prohibits hate speech, this thing that we're talking about. So let me just read you that. It's already there. See if I can find it here. So this is section 319(2), bracket 2, 319 subsection 2. Everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is guilty of an offense. Okay? Now, that section's in there, but what is not in there right now in the criminal code is a definition of what hatred is. And that's one of the things that Bill C-9 is providing, which is the definition that we read out earlier. And here's a couple of things to note about that definition, which we've already talked about. Hatred means the emotion. So in other words, what's happening here is that they are criminalizing an emotion.
Emotions, yeah.
They're not criminalizing acts. And so criminal offenses typically have two different kinds of elements, things that the prosecution must prove. Number one is the act. Did you do the thing? And the second is the intent. Did you intend to do the thing? The actus reus and the mens rea. That's standard for criminal offenses, and that's appropriate. Okay. This is a third thing, a different kind of thing. It's not act, it's not intent, It's emotion. And for my money, emotions have no place in the criminal law. Who cares what emotion you had when you did the act? Which brings me to another problem in the bill. Okay? It includes a new, what they call included offense. Let me read it to you. Everyone who commits an offense under this act, that is the criminal code, or any other act of parliament, that is any other federal law, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred based on race, origin, language, color, etc., then you are guilty of another added included offense. So if, for example, you commit an offense under not even the criminal code, but some federal regulatory act, I don't know what it might be, the Competition Act, and you commit that offense with the emotion of hatred, then you've also committed now a criminal offense.
Crazy.
It is crazy. It's crazy. But here's the problem. What they are essentially doing in here and elsewhere is saying this, that two acts that are both wrong, if one of them is committed with the emotion of hatred, that one is worse than the other one. So let me give you two examples. Let's say somebody attacks you on the street. Actually, you're having a bad day. You get attacked twice. The first is an attack by a guy who attacked you for no reason at all, just because you were there. He didn't care. He was a sociopath or a psychopath. He did it without any care at all. He attacked you because you were there. He doesn't know you, doesn't care what you are, attacked you and hurt you badly. Okay, that's the first offense, first act. Here's the second one. The second situation was you got attacked again by somebody who looked at you and said, I don't like the look of his face, or I don't like the color of his face, or I don't like, his background. And so I'm going to attack him. And in both situations, the attacker harmed you to an equal extent. Question: which of those two offenses is worse? The one where the guy couldn't care less, or the one that was motivated because of who you were?
As per the law, the second one is worse. As per the law.
Oh, it should be both equal, right? Because the act was the same in both cases.
That's my point. That's my point. My point is, in both cases, the person did something violent against somebody else and caused injury. They are both the same, but not in the law. The law now says, oh, no, if you do it with hatred in your heart, you are a more serious offender than the other guy who couldn't care less. Okay? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, well, let's say the first guy was motivated. Let's say the first guy was motivated not by disinterest, but by greed, or by envy, or by some other kind of distasteful emotion. No, sorry, that's not hatred, though. Hatred is the thing that we're going to be concerned about. This is a woke version of free speech, and for that matter, criminal law.
Yeah, it's there's kind of, I personally think there's some others with the idea of hatred against identifiable groups, and that's because it doesn't really apply to everyone. If someone, white people are not included in that group. So if someone were to attack, me or my son, my 17-year-old son, who's a white guy, and said, white devil or whatever, or clearly motivated by that, they would not be charged with a hate crime. And to me, that just seems blatantly unfair.
And now you're getting to the underlying theme and agenda here. That you're exactly right. This is a means by which to establish two-tier justice. Yep. To apply these rules to some people and not others, depending upon who the perpetrator is and who the victim is. It is a tool in the hands of the state to decide for themselves who they prefer to be lenient on and who to prosecute to the nines.
So the next part of Bill C-9 that is just going to be changed, at least if we listen to what the National Post has said, the Liberals have made a deal with the Bloc Québécois behind closed doors where the good faith religious protection of Section 319 of the Criminal Code will be amended through Bill C-9. So an amendment is going to be done to Bill C-9 in order to remove the good faith portion of Section 319 of the Criminal Code, the part that is currently protecting, let's say, the Christians and the Bible against being accused of hate speech for saying something like homosexuality is a sin.
Right. Correct.
Is religious speech, in your opinion, as a law professor, is it something that should be protected because it is something, because let's be honest, North America has been funded by Christian values. That's what we were founded on. Or is it just regular speech that should just be protected like any other speech out there, no matter the fact that it's religious? Because me saying that homosexuality is a sin is not the same as saying we should throw every single homosexual off a building because they don't deserve to live. There's a massive difference between both. Right?
Of course, 100%. And my answer to your question, which I think is you really put your finger on, my preference will be the second one.
Yeah.
If you have a sincerely held belief that homosexuality is wrong, or that there are only two sexes, or that you cannot change your gender.
Oh, whoa, Bruce, we're gonna have to stop you right there. That's the line, though. Women can.
Yeah. You don't believe? Are you telling me women can't have penises, Bruce?
Whoa.
But the question is, if you hold any of those beliefs sincerely,
entirely reasonable beliefs,
should it matter? How you come to that belief? Does it matter whether or not you come to a sort of religious text or a religious set of learnings, or because you were interested in biology, or for whatever other reason? What difference does it make why you have that opinion? And in the law as it is right now, it does matter why. And this is the exception that you were referring to. Let me just read that one out. This is Section 319 as well. This is one of the defenses in this subsection 3. No person shall be convicted of an offense of uttering hate speech, like I described before, if in good faith the person expressed or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject, or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. Okay, now that's appropriate. Like, people shouldn't be held to have committed criminal offenses under those circumstances. I agree with that. I'm not in favor of getting rid of this exception. All I'm saying is that ought to be the exception, whether it's religious or not.
Yeah, we agree. Because right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but subsection 3 that you're talking about, or subsection 2 of 319, also stipulates that the existing criminal code sentence for hate speech where good faith is no longer a protection is 2 years in jail, or up to 2 years in jail.
That's correct. Yes.
So I basically could say that women cannot have penises, that there's only two genders, and being homosexual is a sin, and I could potentially go to jail for 3 sentences of 2 years. Is that? No, I'm just kidding. But it would be for 2 years because it's 3 different sections of hate speech, right?
Right, of course. Well, that would depend upon whether a court would decide that you are on the bad side of the line rather than the good side of the line. I hope. See, prosecutions for hate speech are quite rare, and they should be. Again, the law should not exist at all. But fortunately, the prosecutions are fairly rare. We do not want to get into an era where that changes, like it's happening in the UK. I mean, people are being jailed for their tweets in the UK. And this is an aspect of Bill C-63, which died when the election was called. But this is an element of C-63 which was arguably worse than what's in C-9, because C-9 is just about the criminal law. That's bad, very bad. But it will be applied not as often. The C-63 included amendments to the Canadian Human Rights Act, which is much easier to complain about and much easier to get in trouble over.
Before we get to Bill C-63, do you agree that Bill C-2, Bill C-8, Bill C-9, and the new retabling of Bill C-63 are meant to operate as one big fuck you bill? They just chose to split it into a few in order for people to not really see how they are connected. Because there's a reason why Bill C-9 is going to be amended to exclude the good faith protection that Section 319 provides to religious texts, because the next step is C-63 to be implemented by a self-proclaimed Christian that believes the Bible is hateful. So they are working in conjecture. Am I right, or
No.
Is there some?
I think you're right. Now they have from reports they have largely abandoned C-2 and have put some of the provisions C-12 into another bill called C-12.
Yep.
So we'll see if that happens. But yes. So the thing that they all have in common, and what makes them part of a package, is the idea of supervision. They believe the government's job is to supervise, whether it's your speech, whether it's your currency, whether it's your internet services. Like, they require the tools to watch over you to make sure that your thoughts and speech and behavior are appropriate. And as long as we have that idea embraced by the population at large, this is the kind of regime you're going to get.
If only someone had written a novel warning us about that.
1984, greatest book ever written. And I will say this, like I've said a million times, it was supposed to be a warning and not a blueprint. That's where we really messed up.
Right.
Let me just one more question before we jump to Bill C-63, because this is really how I got to know a lot of understanding of Bill C-63 is to hear you describe it on the Jordan Peterson podcast. But from your opinion, not only as a law professor, but as somebody that understands the law, that understands what's going on, that follows politics, would you say that there is an attack at the moment on faith, not just Christians, but on faith as a whole? It seems that the government, our new liberal government, is very keen on attacking religions or faith. Is that what you're seeing too?
I think that's fair. Yes. And one might ask, well, why bother? And I think there are several possible answers. One of them is that it is part of the social justice woke ideology. If you live in a brain space that says, society consists of power relationships, and there's there's some people on the top and some people below, then exactly, some are oppressors and some are oppressed, and our mandate is to flip that hierarchy. So the people on the top have to go to the bottom. Well, the people on the top, at least in their vision, I'm not sure that it's true right now, because they're already on the top. So the woke progressives are on the top, and they will not accept that they are. But their agenda still is to put the people who have traditionally been on the top, and since it's a Christian nation or was founded on Christian principles, Judeo-Christian principles, then people who are Christian are seen to be the most powerful and therefore have to be displaced. Right. Along with, frankly, you guys know what the characteristics are: the Christians, the Jews, the white people, the men, the straight men. It's like, all the usual suspects, right?
The people at the bottom of the hierarchy of oppression, according to the
absolutely, and that's where they belong, because they're the author of all this oppression. Sure, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, and it's the other, and there's lots of others. There's lots of others to talk about, but let me just add a second one. Okay, this is a lot like the Soviet Union in this sense.
Mm.
The Soviet Union wanted to stamp out religion because the state was supposed to be the religion, right? Mm-hmm. Belief in the state, and that is the thing that is threatening, or one of the things that is threatening about Christianity. It places one God before the God of the managerial state, right? So it's a competition, if you like. And one of the ways that they want to delegitimize that practice is to punish those who follow that practice. So there's lots of reasons, but those are just two.
They also talk about Marxism 101. Basically, it's Marxist ideology. What you're describing right now, which is
hate the family union.
Oh, 100%. It's right? Displace God, displace men from the family, and replace God by government, and replace the man by government. Just you create a welfare state that's pretty Marxist.
But you'll note, so the other, one of the many ironic and twisted things about this is that while they are trying to punish and stamp out Judeo-Christianity, if I can put it that way, Judeo-Christian values, they are also establishing a regime to stamp out individual autonomy, right? And that includes the people who are not Christians and not Jewish and no religion at all, right? So it's yes, it's an attack on religion, but it's not just an attack on religion.
Yeah, I like longtime viewers of the show, like we talk about this fair amount. I'm not a Christian, I'm atheist, and yet I am still, I still have eyes and a brain, and I can see, it's clear to me that Christianity is uniquely singled out, whereas other religions will be placed above it, exceptions will be made. For example, we'll often see videos of large numbers of Muslims shutting down streets in Toronto and Montreal to pray, something you would never see Christian would not be allowed to do.
Right.
And, even though I am an atheist, I just, that offends my sense of fairness and justice in society that I live in. And it's just, to me, it's a recipe for disaster. We cannot have separate rules where some groups are placed above others. And that's the road that we're going down.
Oh, no question about it. And that brings me back to the charter, right? Because we have a section of the charter that sounds like it gives the right to equal protection of the law, right? That justice is supposed to be blind. The law is not supposed to pay attention to what religion you are, or what color you are, or what sex you are. It's supposed to apply the same rules and standards to everybody. That's what it looks like it says. This is section 15.1 of the charter. And they have the same kind of protection in the U.S. Constitution. Section Articles 5 and 14, I think. One applies to the federal government, one applies to the states. But we have also an exception in section 15.2. And 15.2 says, notwithstanding one, you can prefer some people over others to make up for historical disadvantage.
Of course.
Okay? Now, lots of us said at the time, this is 1982, a lot of us said at the time, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that. And what has happened is that over time, again, this is the Supreme Court of Canada, over time, the Supreme Court has made that exception into the rule. Both of these sections of section 15 do not provide people with equal protection of the law. Instead, they require what the Supreme Court describes as substantive equality. Substantive equality is equality of outcome between groups, which means that the law can, in fact, constitutionally apply a different standard to you than to the next guy.
As another great book written by George Orwell says, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
100%.
Now, there's something that Mark Miller, our new Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, said a few times. He said it during committee on October 30th, but he repeated it 2 days ago on Monday, where he compared the hateful sections of the Bible, at least the portion that he believes are hateful. He compared it to Adil Sharkawi, the Muslim man out of Montreal, Canada, who said, Allah, take care of these Zionist aggressors. Allah, identify them all, then exterminate them, and don't spare any of them. Do you not find it very problematic that a minister that will be responsible for retabling Bill C-63 is comparing me, a Christian, for believing that homosexuality is a sin, to a guy that has openly called for the extermination of Jews?
Are you asking me if I think it's surprising?
What do you think of that? No, what do you think of that? Like, from a legal standpoint, is that not the very definition of what they consider hate speech?
Listen, one of the obstacles we have in front of us is our own continuing disbelief. Like, well, they can't be serious. That's obviously not the same thing, right? So somebody must be making a mistake, or they can't be serious. They're serious. Our disbelief is getting in the way. You have to accept, I think, that there is a program, an agenda, an ideology at work here, and they are telling you who they are. You have to believe them.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that we are in as big a problem as we actually are. Otherwise, we're going to keep insisting that, this can't be right. This is not correct. This is not the way it's supposed to work. The courts will fix this. We've been in this long enough that does not look like it's going to happen.
Yeah. You're definitely right on that. I have a question, Bruce. You had mentioned the UK, and as people who are follow this story and or follow free speech across the world, I think it's pretty scary what's going on there. I assume you also follow all across the world, especially the Western world, the state of free speech in different countries. So my question is twofold here. Do you think we're going to get that bad? Do you think we're going to reach a point where we maybe, it gets too far and there's a backlash and we start going back towards sanity? Or do you think we're going to get like the UK? And also, where do you see Canada standing in the Western world in terms of how bad things are? Like, what's your ranking, right? The UK seems like they're at the top in terms of the worst. The US seems like they're in kind of the best position. And then the rest of the West, and I include, Australia, Germany, France, UK in that. Where do you see Canada ranking, and how do you see the rest of the country stacking up?
Oh, geez. Good question.
Bruce, before you answer, just let me add something.
Yes.
How do you see Canada comparing to the countries like UK if Bill C-63 is passed? I just want to add that to his question.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. It's hard to make predictions. The UK is in a real mess, as we know. It could get pretty bad here. It's interesting, is it not, that the countries that are most closely related to the UK and have their law on what used to be regarded as the best legal system in the world. The English invented the rule of law. The common law is one of the best legal inventions ever, and yet the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand are amongst the Western nations that are in the worst shape. Not the only ones, to be sure, but they haven't fared well. I mean, thank God for the US. Now, the US is in a lot of trouble too. Let's not kid ourselves.
Really?
But in the US, they at least have a struggle going on about what the right thing to do here is. And for example, in the US, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, looks like it's sort of maybe possibly on the way out. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
But their Supreme Court has at least said that it is unconstitutional. Right? Ours insists that it is constitutional. And in fact, in some respects, our Constitution requires it, as do our human rights codes. So it is deeply embedded in the law in Canada. And it's going to be much more difficult in this country to turn things around than it might be in the U.S.
Wow. So what are your biggest concerns with the first iteration of Bill C-63? Because we have no idea yet. The new one has not been retabled, but I think we don't have to wait very long because Sean Fraser, our Justice Minister, said many times that it will be tabled before they go on break again. So probably before the 18th or the 19th of December. That's normally when they leave us for a 6 months hiatus. I'm just kidding, but they take their Christmas break.
Right.
What are the biggest problematic that you see with Bill C-63, especially now that we finally have a definition of hate that we did not have before?
Right. So Bill C-9, I think, is in part an attempt to split C-63 up into bits. So C-63 had 3 bits in it. One of them was criminal, and the third one was the Canadian Human Rights Act, which was, I think, for my money, the biggest problem. They've taken not exactly the same thing, but largely the same theme that was in C-63, they put in C-9. So I would expect a new C-63, which will have a new number, of course, maybe that is focused just on amendments to the Canadian Human Rights Act, which will be based in part upon the definition that they put in place in C-9. That definition will be in the criminal code, but they'll probably borrow from it, and they will create speech restrictions that are enforceable under the Canadian Human Rights Act that anybody can complain about. And suddenly, your online, your tweet or your post, wherever it happens to be, it's not even the police now that will do it. Anybody who looks at that and says, I don't like that guy, I don't like what he said, that's hate speech, or that's a breach of, it's discriminatory, it's a breach of the Human Rights Act, I'm going to complain to the Human Rights Commission. Now you get a whole world of hurt. The police weren't even involved. That's the potential that lies before us if this part of C-63 comes back. And
it's like there's no, it doesn't, you don't need to be identified as the complainer. I will never, let's say that it's me. I've been making hate speech for years. That's what I do every single day, it seems like. So they don't have to be named. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in Bill C-63, they could remain anonymous. And
that's
not
correct.
only that, but there was no timestamp. They could do what woke do best and go through my whole history of posts and find the posts that could be from 5 years ago. They won't have to look very far. They can just look
retroactive.
But all to say, yes, that's the thing. It was retroactive. Yes, that's what Bill C-63 said. At least, Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe that
is what it said.
Was so, and they would be able to do that if they wanted to. There is a restriction on retroactive laws, but it's, according to the courts, it applies to criminal offenses rather than lots of regulatory rights issues. Yeah. Wow. And so yes, and there was also a provision in the old C-63 that allowed for anonymous complaints if the powers that be said it was appropriate. So it was not automatic, but the potential was there to deny you the knowledge of who it was that had complained against you.
Which breaches a fundamental concept of law, is knowing your accuser.
You'd think, right? You'd think, but so many of these fundamental concepts, and this is really one of the big points, right? So we have in our heads a set of ideas about how the law is supposed to work, how the justice system is supposed to work to be called a justice system, right? And that's one of the ideas. The right to know who your accuser is, the right to respond, the right to a separation of powers between legislature and executive and courts, and so on and so forth, all down the line. And this is one of the reasons that we are held back in our thinking, because a lot of those ideas simply don't actually apply now. We are hanging our hopes on a set of old ideas. Now, these old ideas are still acknowledged and they're still praised. And often they are applied in a courtroom, for example, but not always, because there is a set of other competing ideas, and in some places, some situations, opposite ideas that are also being applied in the law now. So my point is, you can't depend on these things anymore. And if you are, and taking comfort from the idea that they will be honored, you might be down the wrong road.
It's, one of the things I always try to find is solutions. Like that was the goal of this show, is to find common sense where we can find common ground. We can agree, even though Rob's a liberal, I'm a conservative, and not big C conservative, a small C conservative.
Yep.
But it's one thing to complain. It's one thing to talk about the problems. We need to find solutions, because that's the stage we're at right now. I think there's a lot of people like us right now that talk about what's going on, what's the problem, but something needs to be done. And I'm always under the impression that it's going to get worse, a lot worse, before it gets better for the average Canadian to realize what's happening. Like, it's going to need to turn into the UK, where their grandmother gets arrested for saying women can't have penises on Facebook, and then she gets arrested for that. Then people are going to start to see that there's a problem.
Right.
But in your humble opinion, I don't know if it's humble, but in your professional opinion, I'll rephrase my question. In your professional opinion, or your researched opinion, what are the solutions to those censorship bills that we're seeing? And if they do pass, if they are passed, which is not far-fetched at all, that within the next 6 months, even less than that, they would be, can we vote ourselves out of the mess that it will create?
I don't know.
Feel free not to answer that question if you want to keep your job at Queen University.
No, listen. Okay, so my answer to that, I don't know specifically about those bills, whether or not you could vote your way out of that. Maybe if you voted for another party that wasn't so gung ho on eliminating your civil liberties, then maybe temporarily. But frankly, it's one of the reasons why I've been supporting Alberta independence, because the solutions for this country as it now exists do not seem to be very good. I don't really see any really feasible paths to fundamental reform of how this country works. The vested interests are too deeply embedded, and the people, most people, a majority of people, don't seem to care, don't seem to understand, don't seem to care. One of the predominant characteristics of the Canadian character seems to be acquiescence. Like, oh, well, the Canadians shrug the shoulders, carry on. That's not a solution to anything. And so even if the country becomes visibly disabled in the sense that you are describing, I don't have a great deal of faith that even then you will get a popular, across the country pushback that will be politically effective.
So your hope is a province separating like Alberta, which would be easier to change and to unwoke.
Well, yeah. And so, people ask me, what are the prospects for Alberta to separate? And the honest answer is, I have no idea. I don't know. That I'm not even in Alberta. I'm in Ontario, and I've been putting in my 2 cents from a distance on Alberta's prospects and trying to encourage them. I think they have a good case. I think they have potential. What are the chances? I don't know. But I've been saying this: whatever they are, whether they're 50-50 or much less than 50-50 or more than 50-50, I can't tell you that. Here's all I know: the chances are not 0.
Yeah.
And that's probably more than you can say for any other solution that's on the table for this country. Okay?
Wow.
Because independence for Alberta, if it happened to succeed, would create the kind of political disruption that this country requires. Nothing else is going to do that. everything will carry on for the most part as it is. Yeah, you'll get changes in the margins. Yeah, you'll get things that are better or worse slightly, but the theme is going to continue. We are governed in a certain way. We are governed by a managerial state. And that does not depend upon which government is in power. We have managerialism embedded in our governing system. It is the state that decides what it is that's proper. And we're not just talking about speech. Now we're talking about everything. We're talking about property use and taxes and schooling and the list goes on and on and on, right? So if you really want to disrupt that system, you have to throw the existence of the country in doubt enough so that the powers that be and the people say, oh, it's not working. So what are we going to do about it? Okay. You're nowhere near that moment right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time you have. If you have, because we're a bit over, but I'd like, if you have another 5 minutes, I'd have a question.
Sure.
Because Nadine Willwood, the person that introduced the two of us, thanks Nadine, by the way, she sent me a video of yours earlier, and you were talking about what's going on in Richmond, BC right now. You
Yes.
kind of just alluded to it, so I'm kind of taking the opportunity to ask the question.
Great.
But is what's happening, the virtue signaling that is happening in Richmond, BC right now, has it made private ownership in Canada a privilege that can be revoked?
Yes, but it has always been that.
Oh, come on.
That's the problem, right? Your property rights, like your free speech, have always been conditional upon government deciding not to interfere with you. So we don't have any property rights in the Constitution, with the exception of aboriginal title, which is the exception. But your property rights are not constitutional rights. The Americans have property rights, but even those are qualified. The American property right in their Bill of Rights says if the state can't take away your property except for public purposes and you get compensated. It's still a license to take it away.
Yeah.
And so in this country, we don't have that even. We have statutory law that basically says the same thing, that the province or the federal government can take your land and pay you compensation for it if they want to build a highway or an airport or something. So your property is not absolute, it's not guaranteed. And furthermore, the ability of both the provinces and the federal government is to regulate what you do on your land. So even if they don't take it away, they can say, as they have done, you can't build a shed on your property without a permit. Okay?
Yeah.
That's interfering with property rights. And we have accepted that as the proper role of government, to supervise everybody so that everything is done properly. That is the assumption. If you went up to somebody on the street and said, do you think that we should have a managerial state? Do you think the government should be supervising everybody and what they do? They would look at you probably and think and say, well, what do you mean? I don't understand the question. That's what government is. That's what it's for. As long as we think that government is for that purpose, we're going to have problems, because everything we're talking about is just an extension of that idea. The government is there to manage the people. If in my books, that is the problem. That is not so in my books. But until we refuse to go along with that idea, you got a problem.
You have to stop giving such great answers, because it only makes me think of other questions. But last one, I promise. Are you saying that the way our government work was intended to work this way? The mess that we're seeing right now, it is just a continuation of the long game that governments play into controlling every single aspect of our life. Is our system working as intended?
Well, yes and no. So the law, the Constitution, has always been based upon authority. But this managerialism that we are now in and have been in for decades and decades, a long, long time, that was not part of the original design. Because, our Constitution, and especially the American Constitution, was built in a different era. But it did not include the concept of a managerial administrative state, but nor did it prohibit it. And so this ideology, this philosophy, and the government mechanisms to bring it to life have come along after the fact and have taken over the territory. Right? And it's very difficult to displace now because it's very deeply embedded in the idea about how things are supposed to work. The law is based upon authority. It's not based upon the facts. It's not based upon philosophy. It's not based upon morality. It's not based upon anything except authority. We ran into this during COVID, right? People saw the COVID rules and thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. We have this and we have that. They're requiring us to do that and stopping us from doing that. That doesn't make any sense. It's got to be illegal, they said, because it makes no sense. It's not in accordance with the science, and it's leading to bad outcomes, they said. And therefore, they said, the courts will declare this to be illegal. And the courts did not declare it to be illegal because those are not the things that count. What counts is, did that officer or that office or the ministry or the minister or the public health official, did they have the authority to do what they did? If the answer is yes, that's the rule.
So that's crazy. That when you think of it like that, even the courts just go along with and all authority is the guy above you, right? There's no authority granted to him anything other than that he's the guy above you.
Well, but you see, but this is the way, again, going back to the way the system works, right? So you have legislatures. I like to call this the unholy trinity of the administrative state. Here's how it works. We have this idea that we have separation of powers between the legislature and the executive and the courts, right? Checks and balances. And we're all safe because different institutions have different powers, right? Legislatures pass laws. The executive enforces the law. And then the courts apply the law to the cases that they have in front of them, okay? And we're all safe, except that these three institutions are not acting so much as checks and balances on each other anymore. Here's what's happening. The legislature passes statutes that delegate law-making authority to the executive branch, to the ministries, to the bureaucrats, to the officials, to the regulators, to make the rules. That rule-making is supposed to be in the legislature. It's not now. It's in the bureaucracy with the legislature's approval, okay? The courts, instead of watching over the executive to make sure that they have the authority to do what they want, the courts are deferring. Well, they did a certain thing in the public interest. It's sort of within the boundaries of what the statute says. Don't worry about it, okay? You have delegation, you have deference, and that leads to a third thing, which is discretion. This is the discretion of the administrative state to do what they think is right in the public interest. The unholy trinity of the administrative state. Delegation, deference, discretion. That's how our system works.
Wow, that's crazy.
You know what, Bruce? With all due respect, screw what you just said. Screw it all. Screw it all. I did not need to hear this, but I'm very, I don't know if you have any words, if you have any closing statement, I think in legal term it would be. But I really appreciate you coming. I really appreciated the conversation because it's always, you can tell that you're very polished in front of a microphone. Like you spent a lot of time being interviewed and it shows. And I appreciate that you came on. But yeah, screw you for what you said because now I'm just a bit more depressed than I was prior to the show. But in all honesty, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for putting it into layman's term, if you will, so that people can somewhat understand what law is all about, because it is meant to be confusing to the masses so that they don't understand what's going on, right?
It is, yes. It's a kind of code, and that's one of its functions. It's true. It's not a conscious function, but that's the way it works for sure. But if you want, if there's anything hopeful, I don't really mean hopeful in that sense, but let's just put it this way: before you can fix a problem, you have to understand what the problem is.
Yep.
Right. So let's just take it that way.
I'm a Christian first and foremost, so I know it's going to get worse before it gets better. So all of this is part of the plan. So I'm just trying to understand what's going on, but I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, I can invite you again. We tend to have friends of the show, as we call them, as something comes up. We're very topical. So what's going on, we talk about it. So if hopefully I can put my Bruce signal in the air and you'll show up to talk about some law perspective of what's going on. But yeah, if you have anything to plug, as Rob says, please do so.
Right. Well, thank you. Listen, if people want to look at what I do, it's on our Rights Probe site, rightsprobe.org. I'm also have a Substack, which I tend to occasionally, Bruce Pardy at substack.com, and they can follow me on X at Pardy Bruce. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah,
you should change
Bruce.
your middle name to Time. It should be Bruce Party
Time.
I've never heard that one before.
You're welcome. I'm very good at finding people nicknames. So Party Time, that'd be a great nickname.
That's good. That's not bad.
Yeah. No, thanks for your time, Bruce. This was a great chat. I think we all learned something tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Absolutely. Well, there we have it, man. Guys, I'm very happy about this.
Wow.
It's always great to have somebody that is a scholar, that knows how to explain it, that is not boring. Because unfortunately, a lot of scholars out there are quite boring, and it makes for very, very dry episodes.
You can have one or the other. You can have a lot of knowledge, or you can be entertaining. But very few people have both. So, that was Bruce is one of them for sure. That has both. That was extremely. I thought that was a great chat. I was watching the comments. I can tell the audience really liked it. A bit depressing at the end there, but I mean, I'd rather be depressed by the truth than have cheered by lies.
100%. And I'm gonna re-listen to it tomorrow, because it's one thing to just be during the show and being able to just listen to what he said without having to continue the conversation afterwards. But yeah, it was great. I'm absolutely, hopefully he comes back. Hopefully, Wise Guy was talking about Gad Saad. That's another guy I've been chasing. That is a guy,
huge get.
That's somebody I've been chasing after for a while. It's just a matter of time. I will get him one day. But it's who you know. So I think I'm going to ask Bruce. I'm going to text Bruce afterwards to see, because I wouldn't be surprised if they know each other.
See Bruce if you get Jordan Peterson on.
Jesus, now that's a massive. That's a matter.
He actually knows Jordan.
Oh, of course, he's been on the show. So
yeah, he might know Gad as well.
Well, we'll put a pin into it, as you like to say. But before we do, we have to remind you guys of the sponsor, the official sponsor of the Political Orphans, Gabble, the world's first video debate app on the market. You can choose to sit back and watch, or you can do like me and debate other people. Because I got to tell you, it's fun and people are polite. So I'm very surprised by the platform. Very cool stuff. If you want to debate, practice debating people, Gabble's the way to go. Just check in the comment section below. There's the affiliate link. And when you download the app, you encourage us, because we are getting paid to advertise it. But we believe in the program. I'm there. So join it. You guys should try it. And that's all I got. Hopefully, guys, you guys tell me if you liked Bruce, if you like those type of guests, because I'm always working hard to get them. But if you guys have suggestions of people I should try to go after, let me know. That's also something that I try behind the scenes. So yeah, if you guys liked it, let us know in the comments. If there's other people you think we should have on, let us know. I will chase after them. But on that note, I'm done.
Yep, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the chat as much as we did. If you want, as always, if you want to support the show, you want to support the community that Nico and I are building, you can please consider becoming a member. You can do that through YouTube for the low price of $2.99. And also we got to shout out Stu for a tip. He says hate speech will be defined by anything the liberals hate, and you're right about that, Stu, or at least at the beginning, and that's the intention. But who's to say when a conservative government comes in, they don't criminalize pro-Palestinian speech, which is of course the reason why you don't even go down this rabbit hole in the first place. Because even if you support it because it's your side that's doing it, it's going to be used against you at some point. So appreciate that, Stu. Other than that, folks, have a great rest of your night. We'll see you tomorrow night. Wrap up the week. Peace.